in our press conference, we relayed that we would likely complete at 6 a.m. this morning the preliminary investigation as to the cause of the fire that led to the conditions you see behind me. The fire marshal, who will speak in a moment after the mayor and a number of other speakers, they finished that investigation up about 12 hours early, and they made a preliminary determination. There was malice intent, that this fire occurred within the fence line of the facility you see behind me, that it was arson, and that it was done and set intentionally. That determination of who is responsible is an investigation that is ongoing, and that's an investigation that can be aided by the people of the region, not just those that may have been witnesses nearby. Those that are witnesses potentially nearby have already been contacted. We have some preliminary tips as it relates to the prospects of determining precisely who this individual or individuals may be. But we encourage the public more broadly to call a confidential line, 1-800-468-4408, 1-800-468-4408. If you have any tips, any information confidentially that could lead to the determination of exactly who is responsible. Arson appears to be the likely ignition for this fire. That ignition was determined with precision by the fire marshal, CAL FIRE, and their teams, and it allowed us to turn this site back over earlier than anticipated to Caltrans to continue the work on the structural analysis. Number two, the structural analysis is ongoing. The core samples we referenced yesterday, the original core samples, have determined on the basis of the preliminary sampling that the structural integrity of the deck appears to be much stronger than originally assessed. That does not mean that we are moving forward without consideration of a demo. Quite the contrary. We are assessing additional samples, but the preliminary samples showed more positive results than were originally anticipated, again, for the bridge deck structure. That's the larger bridge deck structure. More specifically on that in a moment, but let me remind you, over 100 columns were damaged, 9 or 10 quite severely. You're seeing bracing already being conducted as we speak, and we'll continue the bracing work as we conduct subsequent sample testing. That subsequent sample testing should be back first thing tomorrow morning, and will allow us to make a subsequent announcement of whether or not we're tearing this down and replacing it, or we're continuing the retrofit and repairs and the bracing. It goes without saying that the bracing work would allow us to open up this structure much sooner than a complete demo and repair. Invariably and inevitably, you're going to ask, well, how quickly can that work be done? We're assessing both and. We are working in parallel. We've identified contractors. Those contractors, many of them are actually working on site as we speak, and contracts. We're looking at incentives that were part of the protocols of the Northridge quake as it relates to how we structure those contracts, and we are in a parallel path looking at both repair and looking at the prospects of replace. Once those samples come back, again, by first thing tomorrow morning, we will make that determination, but we don't want to lose an hour in moving forward with whichever outcome is the most appropriate. And remember, that outcome will be determined on one basis, or one principle. That's safety, not just speed. Safety, not just speed. The worst thing we can do is make bad short-term decisions that are profound and consequential life safety decisions in the medium and long term. So the good news is preliminary samples looked more positive than we anticipated. Moving forward with the structural integrity underneath, and we'll continue to look at the prospects of a complete demo and replacement until we determine on the basis of the last samples that will be coming in that may not be necessary. As it relates to yesterday's press conference, we made it clear that we would provide more information about the lessee, Apex Development, Inc. is the owner, or rather the corpus of the lessee. It's the entity that holds the lease to the property you see behind me. As I mentioned yesterday, we assigned an unlawful detainer in September of just a few months ago, and we are heading to court in January. The court date may be pushed to early February, but January, February is the court date. This guy and this organization, members of that particular corporation have been bad actors. We've been in a litigious posture for some time. They stopped paying their rent. They're out of compliance, and as was stated yesterday, and we can stay with more clarity and conviction today, they have been subleasing this site to at least 5, maybe as many as 6 tenants without authorization from Caltrans, without authorization from our federal partners. And I'll remind you that authorization legally is required from both the state and federal partners. There is a review committee that includes the state fire marshal. Questions that were asked yesterday as it relates to the oversight of what is stored and what is allowable to be stored. That goes through a review process and determination, and the federal partners ultimately sign off. We had our federal partners on site earlier this morning. Administrator Batt was here from the Federal Highway Administration. We thank them for moving quickly. We're doing a preliminary assessment. It has to reach a threshold of about $25 million before we can draw down federal support and federal aid. While that's important, it's not necessary for the preliminary work. On the basis of the state of emergency that we advanced, and on the basis of the director of Caltrans' ability to order through an emergency fund and draw down money, that allows for the work you're seeing on site 24/7, 7 days a week, rain or shine, atmospheric river or sprinkles. Doesn't matter. We'll continue to move as quickly as it can, safety first and timeliness second. With all the creativity that is required of this moment and the recognition of best practices that we have experienced across this country, and of course with our own experience on contracting and own experience on incentivizing the speed and security and safety that is required on the basis of what happened here in Northridge. Our teams, legal teams, have been working overtime, including assessing what other leases Apex Development Inc. may be holding. A preliminary analysis determined they have 4 additional leases in and around the area, 5 total. We're assessing whether or not they're in compliance of those leases. Likely not, on the basis of the issues that we've had for years and years on this site that has led to litigation and unlawful detainer and is moving us into court. It's a Calabasas-based company. Beyond that, I don't want to get into any more details as it relates to the lawsuits and the litigation, but as I assured you yesterday, as more information is appropriately brought to my attention, or appropriately share it with you in real time. We are also, and I'll extend this and I'll ask the mayor to speak next, we're also